choices you've made. Some stories sound so awesome, but they're not. They're a classic Gotham tales. Batman succeeds or it fails. Whatever happens, you know the Dark Knight can't be stopped. Our podcast will stop your buying paralysis. Chris's knowledge and Gerry's analysis. They are fans, but they are true in telling you what stories they highly rate. Which are sucky and which are great. So come on and don't be late. Bad books for beginners. Bad books for beginners. Hello, and welcome to this edition of TBU's Bat Books for Beginners, episode 181. My name is Gerry.
And I'm Chris.
And we're your hosts.
On Bat Books for Beginners, we will examine story arcs with Batman and related characters. We'll give you the historical background of the book, break down the plot and the art, and give you our opinions so you can decide for yourself if they're worth a read.
Today's Bat book Chris and I are covering is Catwoman Dies. Chris, tell us a little bit about this book.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Hey, fine stuff on the musical intro. Outstanding job. Hello, Bat fans. Thank you very much for downloading and spending some of your day with us. Catwoman Dies is a 164-page softcover trade paperback that was cover dated February 2008 and had a cover price of $14.99. Online vendors have this for both slightly above and slightly below cover price, from $17.50 to the high end to a mere $8 on the low end. Yeah, Catwoman Dies collects Catwoman Volume 3 with the issue numbers 66 through 72 that were originally cover dated June 2007 through December 2007 that were each cover priced $2.99. The individual issues appear to be available on Comixology. Now, if you're interested in obtaining a hard copy version of the story, this may be the cheaper route to go by going the trade paperback route. As the cheapest copy of Catwoman, number 70, that one issue alone, I saw the cheapest copy from an online vendor was $30.
Wow.
Yeah. Some of the prices for the individual issues were at least twice the cover price, and in some cases 4 to 5 times higher. And I'm not sure why, given the circumstances of the story, as we'll get into it. Selina temporarily is not Catwoman, and this is Holly. Selina comes back, but it's the previous issue that it happened in, versus in 69. Why is 70 so much? It does have a gorgeous, striking Adam Hughes cover, but $30 was the cheapest copy I could find in the back issue route for that. Yeah. For our creative teams, as usual, I'm going to go off my memory and some online resources. I think most of, if not all, the individuals had previous mentions on our podcast. The cover artwork for this trade paperback was done by Adam Hughes. He also did the cover artwork for the individual issues. Hughes is 50 years old. He was born in Riverside Township, New Jersey. I think it's fair to say Hughes is primarily known for his cover artwork, and in particular, those depicting females. In 2008, he did a fine poster of DC Comics' main female characters titled Real Power of the DC Universe. The most recent thing I saw Hughes do was the variant cover to the current issue of Batgirl Birds of Prey. The pencils were done by David Lopez, and the inks were done by Alvaro Lopez. I don't believe there is any relation between the two gentlemen. David Lopez was born in the Canary Islands. He's in his mid-40s. Along with Peter David, he co-created the character Fallen Angel, which had a pretty decent fan following back in the day. This series started in DC Comics back in the mid-2000s, but it was later picked up and published by IDW. More recently, David Lopez has worked on the all-new Wolverine stories for Marvel Comics. Now, we're going on to Alvaro Lopez. The majority of Alvaro Lopez's work for DC appears to be around this time. More recently, he has done inking on Marvel's comics title The Royals. Our writer for this particular book is Will Pfeiffer. Mm-hmm. Pfeiffer was mentioned on a previous show, as before mentioned. Pfeiffer was born in Niles, Ohio. He's 50 years old. He broke into comics with Jill Thompson's Vertigo series Finals, which I confess I'm not familiar with. I first encountered Will Pfeiffer's work on DC's Hero series, which was in the early 2000s, and I thought it was an outstanding book, along with his Sub Diego story arc around the same time on the Aquaman title. Will Pfeiffer is a movie buff, and he had a related podcast that ended a couple of years ago. I'll give a little bit of background and broad brushstrokes for some of the characters that Jerry's going to mention in his story recap. First up, we have Holly Robinson. This character first appeared in the Batman Year One story arc, and that issue that she appeared in first was Batman number 404, cover dated February 1987. The original version of the character was a juvenile prostitute, and later on, subsequently, her character was later left off at a convent. Her character was killed off in the Tin Roof Club story arc in Action Comics Weekly that ran in the issues number 611 through 614. Writer Ed Brubaker brought the character back in his 2002 start of the Catwoman title, and he later admitted in an interview that he wasn't aware of Holly's death until after he reintroduced the character.
Oops.
Yeah, oops. It's been implied that the story where she died was erased from continuity in the 0 Hour story arc. She first appears as Catwoman in Catwoman number 53, Volume 3, in a story arc that Jerry and I covered in episode 173 of our podcast. In DC Rebirth, in current continuity, I'm just going to go right to Wikipedia and cite, when a terrorist cell from Kandak bombs the orphanage Holly grew up in, she uses her training to hunt down and murder each member of the group. Holly ends up killing 237 terrorists, after which Selina chooses to take the fall for her crimes in order to protect her. Batman uncovers this, but Holly attacks him and manages to flee the country before he can take her into custody. She assumes the alias Catherine Ann Turley in this universe. End quote. Also in the story, we have a villainess called Blitzkrieg. This story will mark her only appearances that I could find. She's not to be confused with the villainess Baroness Blitzkrieg, who's a Justice Society villain, nor the Blitzkrieg Bandit, a one-and-done villain from Batman Silver Age. We also have the Russian married couple villains named, you guessed it, Hammer and Sickle. Real names, any guesses? Any guesses? Yes, Boris and Natasha Yulanov. Co-created by Mike W. Barr and Jim Aparo, they first appeared in Outsiders number 10, which was cover dated back in August 2006. A portion of the story that we're going to be discussing ties in with the Amazon Attacks story arc that was a 6-issue miniseries, and which coincidentally also was written by Will Pfeiffer. Over on Amazon.com, Catwoman Dies has a 3-star out of 5 rating based on only 3 reviews. Over on Goodreads.com, this trade has a 3.58 rating out of 5 stars based on 189 ratings and 19 reviews. Yes, but that brings us to just how I say, will Jerry and I rate this book?
I don't know. How will we rate it?
How will we? Stay tuned, listeners. And with that, I shall turn it back over to you, Jerry.
Oh, thanks, Chris. So Chris and I are going to talk about this story after a few messages from some of our friends.
Trekker Talk, a fan podcast devoted to the adventures of 23rd century bounty hunter Mercy St. Clair from the pages of Trekker Comics by creator, writer, and artist Ron Randall. I'm Darren.
And I'm Ruth. We'll be discussing the stories, characters, and art in this excellent retro sci-fi adventure series, as well as having side conversations about other areas of fandom.
We hope you'll join us as we travel from the dangerous back streets of New Galuf to the depths of outer space and everywhere in between.
Trekker Talk is available at podbean.com and on iTunes and Stitcher.
Find us at trekkertalk.com.
Welcome back. So here is the story of Catwoman Dies. Catwoman, the Holly Robinson kind, tries to save a young girl from the clutches of Blitzkrieg, who is the owner of a set of exploding gloves. That's her superpower. She bought some gloves. Holly's captured, and her unmasking is live streamed on the internet. She shouts out the address that she's being held at, and the GCPD goes to save the day. Holly escapes and knocks Blitzkrieg out. Holly takes the girl out to the police, where she is arrested by Detective Lenahan. But there's an explosion in the building in the room Blitzkrieg was holding the girl, and some cops are hurt or killed. They uncuff Holly, and she goes into the building to confront Blitzkrieg. It's just a distraction, however. The GCPD Detective Lenahan sneaks up on Blitzkrieg and pistol whips her and knocks her out. But on the roof, two figures look through the skylight at Holly and Lenahan. It's a man and a woman, hammer and sickle. Bad guy, Soups, in Russian costume, and they are not looking for moose and squirrel.
Nicely done.
Thank you. The man has a hammer, and the woman has a, you guessed it, sickle. The two attack, and Lenahan gets decapitated. Selina Kyle Catwoman is on a snowy Gotham rooftop. She's attacked by Warp, someone who has teleportation powers. Selina stole a magic snow globe from Warp for Calculator in exchange for Calculator erasing Holly Robinson's police record. Selina beats Warp, and they go to Calculator's place to drop off the snow globe. Calculator tells her about Holly's problem with the Russians. Selina heads over to the fight and sees Holly is hurt very badly on the roof of a building. Selina throws a flash grenade, and while Hammer and Sickle are blinded, she shoots them with a gun she stole from a GCPD cop. It doesn't help much. The superpowered Russians only get knocked out for a while. As Selina tries to get Holly out of there, Blitzkrieg gets back up and Selina knocks her back out. They try to get out of the building, but are blocked by an army of GCPD cops. Hammer attacks the cops. Holly gets out of the building in the commotion. Selina gets Blitzkrieg's exploding gloves and explodes Hammer's head and sends him crashing to the sidewalk below. But Hammer gets up. It's Hammer time. Sickle attacks Selina. She shows that she knows about Selina's little girl, Helena, and knocks Selina out. She and Hammer go to Selina's house to hurt the little girl. Hammer gets there first and hurts the babysitter, Karen. Selina comes to and steals a GCPD car and races home. On the way, she sees Helena sitting in the middle of the street with her teddy bear. Selina crashes the cop car to avoid hitting her. Hammer and Sickle had put her in the street to distract Selina, but with all the fiery commotion, Selina is able to spirit her little girl away. Selina calls Wayne Manor, but Bruce isn't home.
Is he ever home? When you
I
call
don't
Wayne
think
Manor?
he really is. He's just watching TV.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, you'll never reach him at home. Come on.
Never. He's watching Green Arrow, right? Hammer and Sickle catch up with her and knock her out, unmask her, and grab Helena. Selina wakes up and gets kicked for her trouble. It gets her in position to get her whip and a super taser. She's able to hurt the two Russians and luckily saves Helena from falling to the sidewalk, but doesn't save Hammer from falling to the sidewalk. Sickle goes to kill them, but Holly saves the day. She called for an ambulance for Karen, and Selina and Helena need to get out of Dodge. In her East End hideout, Selina watches the Bana, terrorist cousins of the Amazon, attacking Washington, D.C. on TV, with Helena playing nearby. Batman silently shows up and holds the delighted Helena, who calls him Bamun. He takes the two to the Batcave. Batman tells Selina that the Bana have been watching her. He wants her to put on her Catwoman garb and make herself visible in Gotham, so the Bana will recruit her. She does, and they do. Magda, one of the Bana, interrupts Selina while she robs a jewelry store and makes an argument for her to join the Bana's effort to redistribute world power. They go to an abandoned warehouse to meet the other members of the organization. The Bana have an almost prehistoric dress, but have scientifically advanced weaponry. To prove herself, Selina breaks into Star Labs and steals a globe filled with, I think it's a radioactive material.
And how many times does Star Labs get broken into? I mean,
all
really?
the time.
All the time? You would think by now. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, just, get a security system, guys. She goes to hide this power source that she's stolen in a planter when she's caught by the Bana, who are watching her. They hit her with a knockout dart. Selina awakens in Gotham surrounded by Bana. They have taken what she stole and put it into a grenade. Magda stands in the street holding the grenade aloft, surrounded by GCPD. If they shoot, Gotham will be destroyed in a nuclear blast. Selina fights her way to Magda and grabs the grenade. Magda is killed in the gunfire. Selina's upset that they killed her unnecessarily. There was no reason for them to shoot her. The GCPD wants to arrest Selina, but she escapes into the sewer with the bomb. The Bana are upset that their plan to destroy Gotham has failed, and they head to Washington, D.C. to join their main battle, but they leave one Bana behind to kill Selina. Selina goes to check out the now empty Bana warehouse when she gets a call from Oracle telling her there is a Bana searching for her.
And shout out to Stella here for mentioning for Oracle. Yeah, we're going to have to bookmark this
absolutely
episode because she's going to cover every Barbara Gordon and / Oracle appearance. So here we go.
Here we go. Check out this one.
Check out this.
Now, the Bana are not searching for quote-unquote Catwoman, but for Selina Kyle. They know her true identity. She contacts Wayne Manor to warn Alfred, who's watching Helena, that the Bana might be onto them. Back at her hideout in the East End, the Bana enters her apartment while Selina is sleeping on the couch. The Bana goes to grab Helena, but she really picks up a doll loaded with knockout gas, which explodes. Selina takes a hammer to the woman and ties her up, also removing her poison tooth so she can't commit suicide. She calls Oracle to have her picked up. Martian Manhunter arrives to get her. Selina thinks about how much danger she has put Helena in over the past few months. She wants her baby to be safe. She calls Batman, who comes to her house. She asks Bruce to take off his mask to talk, which he does. She tells him that this is no life for Helena and asks him for help. She wants him to stage an accident that will appear to kill her and her baby. He agrees. During the day in Gotham, Selina wheels Helena out of a store when a masked figure, the Revolutionary, attacks, demanding the release of political prisoners. He grabs the two and explodes a bomb, quote, killing, unquote, them. The three escape down a manhole. The Revolutionary was, of course, Bruce. The death of the mother and child are all over the news. She calls Zatanna, who comes to Selina's, and the two talk about what Selina has been going through and the danger Helena is in. She has asked Bruce to take Helena away from her to find her baby a new home that is untraceable. He uses his team of lawyers to do so. Selina is heartbroken at the loss of her child. She asks Zatanna to mind wipe Helena from her head. Zatanna says that she shouldn't do it. Selina reluctantly agrees and leaves in a bit of a snit and goes to sleep in her hideout apartment. She has a dream about Helena coming home in a Catwoman costume that she wore for Halloween. When she wakes up, her apartment is totally empty. Someone has robbed and taken everything and left the bomb behind. She escapes the explosion and remarks that this is not a good day for someone to cross Catwoman. The end. Well, Chris and I are going to talk about our feelings for the story after these words from some of our friends.
Beautiful as Aphrodite. Wise as Athena. Stronger than Hercules. Swifter than Mercury. Explore the 75-year history of the Amazon princess with Wonder Woman, Warrior for Peace, a monthly podcast available on iTunes, Stitcher, and at wonderwomanwarriorforpeace.wordpress.com.
Welcome back. So, Chris, what did you think about Catwoman Dies?
Well, Jerry, first off, I got to commend you with your excellent recap because there was a lot to unpack here. There was just so much happening here. A couple of thoughts initially. I really didn't care for this particular run of Catwoman. That said, I'm glad the podcast forces me to look at things and maybe look at it with a little more critical eye, perhaps a little more forgiving, and just check out some things I might have missed. Mm-hmm. So, first off, some of the negative stuff I found. Seeing Holly as Catwoman just depresses me. There was just some plausibilities here. What does it take to keep this villain Blitzkrieg down? I mean, she gets punched out, she gets clocked, and she just keeps getting right back up. I'll mention this now. There is the decapitation of Officer Lanahan. That's pretty graphic. Parents or sensitive readers may want to note this if they're considering reading the hard copy version of the story or any version of it. However, there were some things I liked. The Adam Hughes covers were visually stunning, in particular issue number 70 and issue number 72, which depicts Satana in the forefront. It was an excellent job. Mm-hmm. Batman holding baby Helena in issue 69, that was my favorite moment, along with the Catwoman and Batman interactions in issue number 71. Yeah. So I like this slightly better than I thought I would going into it. And then I know we're going to talk about a lot of things, but those were my initial impressions. Jerry, what about you?
Well, I'm a big, I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast. I'm a Selina Kyle fan. She's one of my top comic book of all kinds character. I like the good versus the bad, and her love of Bruce, and that's really strong for me. I think that her Bruce relationship in the story really, really worked. I like seeing her as a mom. I like to see, when Bruce comes over, he's quiet, and she's like, "Oh, please take your cowl off. Let me talk to you like a normal human."
Great stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And Batman, this is, I think, a good Batman issue. He's not in it very much, but, it really shows how human he is. He's holding the baby, and she notices how gentle he can be with Helena. And she points out, and this is the thing that really nailed this story for me, that made it really work. She recognized, Bruce isn't Batman because he's an angry, vigilante. He, in his bones, wants to protect the innocent. He has a real powerful love for the innocent. And this just was awesome for me. It's just like a one-panel statement she made, and it just nailed, not only the character of Batman, but also, nobody knows Bruce like Selina does. And, I think I'm going to be, a lot of people won't agree with this, but in my head canon, the two of them are kind of soulmates, and they always have. They're two really damaged people, and a relationship between them is very difficult. But nobody, they are just in love with each other and kind of always have been. And that's kind of my headcanon with them. And this just absolutely nails that for me. So that put it over the top. However, your point is that Blitzkrieg doesn't seem to have any powers, but she can't be really knocked out, and Hammer and Sickle can't really be hurt either. And it just seems like, they were playing a little bit of whack-a-mole.
Yeah, I like that we're both really in sync with our thoughts about the elements we really enjoyed in this story. Did we get too bogged down, though, with the Hammer and Sickle stuff and the Blitzkrieg stuff? Now, and the way they were depicted are just think of the hulking figures. They almost look like, I don't want to use the word steroids, but they look like they're really all three, Blitzkrieg, Hammer, and Sickle, all look really beefed up and just muscular and just impossible villains to take out in a fight. And did the opening two issues seem to drag for you in any way?
I think it was just so repetitive that,
okay,
now I'm going to fight Sickle. Now I'm going to fight Hammer. Oh, Sickle's back up. Oh, now Hammer's back up. Oh, Blitzkrieg's back. Oh, let's fight. Yeah. So it just kind of, maybe not the first. That fight just went on a little too long for me.
Okay.
And I really was much happier once we got to the Selina trying to figure out what to do with her baby. I thought that was much more interesting.
I agree.
It is. There's a lot of humor in this, and that is another thing that also worked for me. When Selina calls Wayne Manor and Alfred says, "No, Bruce is out of the country," and she thinks, "Oh, he's on Jupiter with the Justice League." Batman has a car seat for Helena. It's like, when did you get a car seat for the Batmobile? I thought that was really, he's always prepared.
Yes.
Right. And there was also, when they were in the Batcave, right? Tim was watching Helena, and he complains, "Oh, what am I, a babysitter?" But he's awesome with her.
Yeah, I liked seeing those moments with that exchange there. That was really, and it wasn't a lot, but it was just enough to really give you some heartfelt feeling, which was really good there. Gerry, one of the things I had in my notes, and I don't know if it was the timing at play with DC and Will Pfeiffer's working on Catwoman, and he's got a decent run writing the title, but here he is, he's also doing the Amazon Attacks miniseries. To me, it felt a little forced. Bruce shows up, they have this nice, touching moment, and then he's asking her to get involved with this thing, and you could tell she's just not emotionally ready. Yeah. At least to me, that's how it came off. Yeah. Did that feel the same way to you? Do you think this side story with Banna and all that, did that seem a little forced to you, or did it seem like it wasn't maybe executed in a way where it could have been a little more plausible, perhaps?
I think my guess is it was trying to fit something in that was going on in continuity at the time and include her in it and include this book in it. I think that it was kind of strange that Bruce, brought her into it. He did say, he kind of used, she says, oh, I'm a mom, I have kids now. And she says, oh, well, how about all these other mothers that died because of the Banna, and he names them. And it's kind of seems like he's forcing her onto the field when
it felt a little guilt trippy to me too. Yeah,
definitely. He makes a rationalization for it. Like, oh well, war isn't fair and something like that. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that was a little iffy. There was a lot of kind of confusing things and kind of, that power source that she stole from Star Labs, and at the beginning, I think in one issue, they said it was radioactive, but then in the next issue, they said there was a biotoxin. I wasn't sure if they had just made a mistake in kind of continuity between the two issues, or if there was something else going on.
Yeah, I just think Object MacGuffin or something here at this point, and I don't know if one was shielding another, perhaps. Who knows? I got lost there, but that is a good point. I was confused, but I just kind of begrudgingly went with it. There was so many things to question over the course of it, certainly. And one of the things I was questioning was just even a mild nitpick was in the story arc we're reading it, Selina, her hair is initially dark, but then later on, as we get to the latter part of it, it's light brown. That's so, right. It's just like, well, which is it? I don't know if there was a little coloring thing going on there, and I'm not sure if I like Selina with the light brown hair depiction or not. But
I always think
it is what it was. But I think that was one of the other things that, right, and that was one of the things, along with the Star Labs power source and then this thing, those little things add up during the course of a read and, kind of take you out of the story at hand when you see these little continuity speed bumps in the road.
Yeah. Now, what was that at the end? So she went to bed, she was in her apartment, and then she woke up and her whole apartment had been cleaned out, including the bed she had fallen asleep on.
I know. What was up with that? That was another thing I had in my notes, that it was just didn't make any sense.
Someone broke in and stole the bed Catwoman was sleeping in.
I know.
And it was like, what?
Yeah, or, this is going to make us have to reread or go, when we cover the next trade paperback, I'm sure we'll have to see if this answer is explained because, that just kind of left you with like a what the what moment, and just like, I couldn't account for it there, nor is any explanation given.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Another thing, so that's kind of some of the downsides of this, but, I did feel her conflict with the baby, with just that feeling of putting her baby in danger and wanting to give the baby away, and then she's so heartbroken, and that really worked for me. And there was the one scene when she was asking Bruce, she was in the Batcave and asking Bruce to take her away from her. And she's looking at Jason's costume. And it was like, that, she's thinking our loved ones can die doing this stuff. And it was just so strong for me.
Yeah, and that same with me, and along with the exchange that Selina had with Zatanna, with the flashbacks and her motives for doing this. Now, I'll say up front, I never really cared for the whole Selena having a child conception with Sam Bradley and that whole thing, and then Sam getting killed off, and I just hated that whole mess. I know some people liked it, but fair enough. But as this was depicted, I mean, if you're going to at least build from that, I did at least like the acknowledgement, and we can really get a whole emotional gut punch of what Selena's going through, and how that was done was, I have to admit, well executed. If I didn't like the means of how we got to this place, but at least how it was depicted was certainly done with thought and concern. I will have to grant Pfeiffer that. Yeah,
when they were showing a couple of fantasy scenes where Selena's thinking about Helena growing up, and they snuck away to the coast of Spain, and they're playing in the water and on the beach, and the whole thing about Helena coming home in a Catwoman suit, but it's just Halloween. It's just, it really hit home for me. That what she was feeling. I do have to say, I'm glad that Zatanna didn't do the mind wipe thing, because that is seriously getting old at this point.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you have anything else kind of in general to say about this? Or are you ready to kind of think about your rating?
I think I'm ready to jump in my rating. I didn't have anything else in my notes. How about you?
Yeah, I think I'm ready to go. What do you think?
Well, I have to say, there was one thing. We did have a nice Martian Manhunter appearance.
Yes.
The moments we had with Bruce and Selena were very touching, but this, I wanted more of this. We get really bogged down with a lot of violence and a lot of things that were just kind of over the top, in my opinion. And I really never cared for the Holly era of Catwoman. I'm glad to see that we're moving on past that. I had some huge grudges going into this. I have to admit, after a reread, I did like this slightly better than I initially thought I would. So my rating is going to be 3 out of 5. I don't think it's a must-read. I do want to recommend, though, I think Will Pfeiffer did an outstanding job in a trade called Aquaman Sub Diego. And if you could find his work that he did in the Hero title in the early 2000s, I would recommend that. I also want to give a recommendation to Christie's Cattails fan fiction. I think it's outstanding. And I really like Tim King's current run on the Batman title with the way the Catwoman's being depicted there. I think we get a really good stuff. Now, some of the current story arc with the Ivy, sort of the ending left me a little flat, but overall, when you see that Selena-Bruce relationship and the byplay they have with each other, this is spot on. And this is the stuff I'm really, really getting my teeth into, and I can't wait to see where it goes in the upcoming months. So my rating is 3 out of 5, and I think it's not a must-read, but it's, probably for some hardcore fans, and I'm sure there are some out there who really like this era and like this run. Go for it. And Gerry, what say you, my friend?
Well, I am going to go a little higher. I'm going to go 4 out of 5. And the reason is that I probably am one of those that is very invested in the Bruce-Selena relationship. I like Selena Kyle's character very much, and I think that this really shows all of the comments, the complaints we had about the plot and the fighting and all that stuff, I think is absolutely true. But for me, the whole relationship thing and the whole experience of Selena as a mom and, working with Batman and how this story exposes Batman's character, I really, really worked for me. And like I said, I'm the first one to say that their story was a little confusing at some points, and I think they messed up the plot a little bit in a few places. But if you are a Selena Kyle fan, I think that, well, maybe this isn't a must-read, but I think you're going to like what you get here. And I would recommend it to Selena Kyle fans. But if you're coming in hoping for some, good logical action scenes, maybe this isn't the one for you.
Great. Fair enough.
There we are. So, well, Bat Books for Beginners is part of the BatmanUniverse.net network of podcasts and Batman news and reviews. We offer all the Batman-based weekly comic book reviews, news, and a lot of great podcasts, including the flagship comic podcast. There's Everyone Loves the Drake, Batgirl to Oracle, and so many more. If you like what we offer, please consider donating to us at the TBU Patreon account. You can find a link to the Patreon account on the BatmanUniverse.net website. Now, I mentioned Batgirl to Oracle, Chris. You do some work on that for Stella, don't you?
I'm very proud to be on Stella's show, where she reviews all the Barbara Gordon Batgirl appearances. Everything related to Batgirl, it can be found on Stella's show. Mm-hmm. It's an outstanding show. And over there, I'm reviewing the Batman Adventures comic book, which was from the early 90s, and that's based on Batman the Animated Series. Yeah. There is a little news coming out, though. They're at Batman 66, a title I formerly reviewed on Stella's show, is going to be teaming up with Archie this summer. So there's going to be a 6-issue crossover. So I am going to – it sounds like I'm really going to cover a lot of ground in the coming year, yes. So,
you do great work on that.
Thank you. I have a lot of fun with it, and it'll give me a chance to pull out my William Dozier with some narration. And it's I got those things chambered, and I never thought I'd get to review another Batman 66 book. So I can't wait to get into that and continue reviewing Batman Adventures. And I do take a quick little peek at Nightwing, so just to see if there's any shipping action going on there, just to give a shout out to the fans. Now, Gerry. You do some outstanding written work, if I'm not mistaken. Could that also be found on the Batman Universe website by chance?
It sure can. I've been reviewing Batgirl and the Birds of Prey, the main Batgirl comic, and also Mother Panic, who's coming out, I'm going to be reviewing this week coming up. I guess when you hear the folks listening to this podcast, it should be out on the BatmanUniverse.net website. So check out my work there. Now, Chris, you are on Twitter, aren't you?
Yes, thank you so much for the plug. I can be found on Twitter at BTO and Batbooks. Again, that's at BTO and Batbooks. I sort of wax nostalgic. Sometimes I'll whatever catches my eye, pop culture related things of that, I'll just chime in with some comments on. But it seems with every podcast drop, more followers have turned up. So I really can't thank you enough. I've really enjoyed interacting with the folks who have found me on Twitter, and me finding them on Twitter, and finding just so many people that are into comics or pop culture, what have you. It's been a blast, and I can't thank you enough. It's just been so much fun interacting with everybody out on Twitter. Gerry, I'm sure folks can find you on Twitter as well, my friend. Where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Professor Frenzy. So over there, I'll cover my favorite DC books, some indie books. I usually do a couple of 280 character reviews of my favorite books of the week. I had a couple of pretty good ones this week, so I was pretty happy about that. I also talk about, some cheesy horror movies, some dark shadows, and Chris and I actually do the MeTV Twitter feed at hashtag Svengoolie, and we have a lot of fun doing that.
We did. Now, I have to confess, full disclosure, I did not really get involved with last night's show. At the time we were recording, they reran Ants, which just had come, it had even been a month since they showed that initially. So I thought, and I think everyone was kind of in Twitter going, well, do I say the same jokes again? Or maybe I can use the joke I had intended to, but the Wonder Woman episode on before was good, and I came back for Batman, but I kind of went sort of Twitter dark for a little bit during the Svengoolie, and I apologize. I followed along, though. I chimed in, and I liked the tweets from some of my friends, but I just really didn't. I just really couldn't think of anything new to say on that one. But Svengoolie, hey, I'm not going to fault him for something. Powers, things come up, and we love that show. Definitely. It is just such a great community of fans out there, and it's a blast to get in on that. And we certainly welcome you to do so if you're so inclined, and if you get MeTV. So it's a lot of fun.
We have a great time doing that. So we also have a lot of other podcasts and that we listen to and love. One of them, one of my favorites is Cosmic Treadmill and Weird Comics History by Chris Sheehan, who you can see on Twitter at Ace Comics and at Reggie. So Chris and Reggie, they discuss some classic comics, and it's just a lot of fun. They have great detail, and they do the voices, and it's just so much fun. I love listening to them. Chris also has a blog where he does a comic book a day review. Chris is on Infinite Earth, so I recommend you go check that out. That's something.
Yeah, and if you're a fan of Superman and Action Comics, his Action Comics is closing in on its 1,000th issue in a couple of weeks. Yeah, so it's really good stuff, and he's covering quite a bit of fair ground there. And a lot of stuff was right in my wheelhouse with what recent columns have been in stuff in the 70s, and it was just I remember those books having as a kid, and I have a pretty healthy run of Action Comics, and just reading those is a treat. So if you're a fan of comics in general, take a look. You don't have to necessarily be a Superman fan to really enjoy Chris's take on some of these books. This is great stuff.
Great stuff. And of course, we have been listening to the Sutherland's podcasts, which are Warlord World, Xenozoic Xenophiles, Trekker Talk. They've got Sensational Sleuths and Fantastic Fantasies, which are just a great series of podcasts by a great bunch of hosts. Darren and Ruth Sutherland are just really terrific folks.
Yes, Jerry, you and I guested on a past episode. In fact, on the recent episode, I can be found as a guest where I reviewed a Mike Grell issue of Superboy. Had a lot of fun there,
and boy. Really good.
Well, thank you so much, because those other guests on there were really sharp as well. So I thought overall it was a really good show, and I think we all complimented each other with what we each brought to the table and how those issues from back in the day, what they meant to us. We all have fond memories of not just the comics themselves, but from that time period. And I thought it was an outstanding show. So yeah, if you don't mind me putting a plug out there, check out the recent episode of Warlord Worlds, the current episode that's out there right now. It was a great show.
Great stuff. So another podcast we're listening to is the Longbox Crusade with Pat Sampson and the guys, and they just started a new feature called Saturday Matinee Theater, which goes through the 50s Sherlock Holmes TV show, and I just downloaded it a little while ago. I can't wait to listen to this one. That should be great.
Same here, and I got to confess, being a Sherlock Holmes fan, I was not familiar with this, so I'm going to be really interested to see get some background on this. I'm really, really curious.
It's going to be great.
Yep.
Other friends of ours is Randy Andrews, who does Soundtrack Alley and Gen 13, and Randy's always puts on a really good show. Definitely recommend that. Clinton Robeson does Coffee and Comics. So that's another great podcast that just takes about the amount of time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. So it's always a good time. Wonder Woman Warrior for Peace. That's a terrific. If you're a Wonder Woman fan, that is the podcast to listen to. You've been listening to that too, haven't you?
Yes, that's the podcast where Angela covers everything in chronological order, from the Silver Age to the George Perez era to the New 52 era, and then she'll also take a look at the Linda Carter TV series from the 70s, episode by episode. And it's just a great listen to hear her take on each one of those things, to see how some of the Golden Age stuff has aged, and even seeing how some of the how the TV show has aged.
Oh, yeah.
Too. Angela doesn't hold back, and she'll give you her rating on each one of these things, and I really like her perspective on the material that's covered. Just a great show.
Yeah. It's so timely, with the movie coming out, and I just love the TV show too. So it's just a wonderful listen.
Yep.
We've also been listening to Parlapod.
That's a great new show. Friends of our show. Yeah, they took a week hiatus, but John and David were really good, and moving from. Poor guy moving from Worcester to Texas. I hope they settle out. Yeah, but no, they took. But boy, it seems like they didn't cover ground. Had some great interviews from LexCon in the most recent episode. So be sure to check out the most recent episode of Parlapod. You won't be disappointed.
Yeah, definitely not. So another one that I've been listening to. This is getting a little outside of the comic book world, but I'm listening to Monster Kid Radio, which is a old Universal and Hammer and kind of old timey horror movie podcast. Which if you're interested in that kind of thing, I definitely recommend that. That is a good one.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I'll have to check that out. I appreciate that. On our last episode, we covered the Batman and Sons story arc, and we got a comment over on the Batman Universe website. And if you'd like to leave a comment for either Jerry or myself about this episode, that's where we would direct you to. So go head on over to the Batman Universe website. Mm-hmm. And just another plug-in, if you're thinking about it, consider giving us a review on iTunes. We've been getting more followers on Twitter, but I don't know if we've moved the needle too much on iTunes. But, if you're so inclined, hey, we thank you so much. So over on the Batman Universe website, we got a comment from Matches_Malone, and he wrote in to say, Damian is just the best. He's the worst in this book, but it's completely intentional.
It is.
This is his first story, but his first full story is nearly 10 years long. He's evolved into such a complex and heartfelt character while still maintaining his signature attitude. I can't think of any mainstream superhero characters that evolved as much as Damian. He is easily my favorite Robin just because he's the most complex and honestly makes the most sense as a child sidekick of Batman. Morrison did some great things, but it was, in my opinion, Pete Tomasi that really developed Damian in Batman and Robin in the New 52. Well, thank you so much for writing, Matches_Malone. We really appreciate the feedback there. Yeah, it's weird because we get everybody's take on the Robins, and you kind of think, there's so many things that each character brings to the table. If you stop and think about it, with the Tim Drake and the Dick Grayson and then Jason and now. Yeah, and Stephanie for the brief time that she was there, so everybody's got their own, And speaking of everybody, over on Twitter, our good friend Ian Miller, who's at IBM Miller, commented with regards to our last podcast, again, that was the Batman and Son story arc. Ian said, I think this is a very important story. It avoids many of the pitfalls of the Morrison characters constantly speechifying their awesome plans. Damian is really dislikable here. Yeah. I only warned to him when he teamed up with Steph and Batgirl. Morrison didn't seem to want me to like him. Well, there you go. So, Ian, I appreciate your comments and writing in. So that was really, really good. And we really like to see everybody's different take on this because, sometimes when you try to craft an opinion about a story arc and a particular character, I can be very, very rigid. I have to admit, with my like or disdain for particular comic book characters. But it's really interesting to see some different people's takes on some of these. So I really appreciate it. And I'm not necessarily saying about that with respect to Damian, but just characters in general. I think that's where that's really unique, just to have people chime in, because some things resonate more with others and some don't, and it's just really nice to see everybody coming at this at so many different ways.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I know even myself, sometimes I like Damian, sometimes I don't. Sometimes Tim's my favorite. Sometimes, it just can change depending on the story.
Yeah, and I forgot Carrie Kelly too, for God's sakes. So there's just so much Robin out there. Robin out there. With every successive episode, I think the likes and retweets on Twitter keep continuing to grow, and we can't thank you enough. So I really want to give some nice shout-outs here to those people that liked and retweeted with respect to our last episode. So here we go. Brace yourself. This is going to be a long list, and I know I'm going to forget somebody, but here we go. We had likes and retweets from Reggie at Reggie, Christados at Christados1, who said another great episode. Thanks for the shout out. You bet. Thank you very much for chiming in. We also heard from Creator Talks at Creator Talks Pod, Xenozoic Xenophile at Xenozoic Xenophile, Tanman Gerlig at the Tanman 94, Ronica Sol at Ronnie Howlett 3, Superhero Poll Plus at Superhero Poll Plus, the Rad Adventures Network from Darren Sutherland, and they can be found at Rad_Adventures, Lost in Time at Lost in Time 74, which is a great Twitter feed if you have any inclination of being just a hint of a Spider-Man fan. Ooh. Check out Lost in Time at Lost in Time 74. Great stuff. Comics in the Golden Age at Comics in the Golden Age, Scott X at The Mind of Scott X, Brentley Ellenberg at Brent Sellenberg, Lava Hog at Lava Hog. Mm-hmm. Again, our folks at Palaprod. Dustin Fritchell. Hey, Dustin. Dustin. Yeah, he's getting in on this. Dustin can be found at Bearded Bat Chief. Our good friend Jeff Hunter at JeffHun4911855. Christian at Ace Comics. Longbrock's Crusade at Longbrock's Crusade. Nightstar at CCaps357. Hey, Thank you very much for the nice tweet promoting our podcast. Thank you so much.
Great.
Yeah, we also heard from Jim at Canada Daredevil, Occulte Veritatis Podcast, excuse me, let me try that again, Occulte Veritatis Podcast at Occulte V, Hicks at reading_Hicks from the Waiting for Doom podcast, another fine show, friends of ours. Nerd News at nerd_news01. BJ Mendelson at BJ Mendelson. A shout out to BJ. Check out his tweet feed. Oh my gosh, you're going to find some great artwork and just an all around nice guy. Parlapod at Parlaprod. Madam Monstrosity at Mad M Monstrosity. Our friend Randy Andrews at the Gen 13 Files. The Superheroes, Secret Wars, and Beyond. That's our good friend Sean at SeanAZ42, who also tweeted and chimed in. Great show. I can't stand Damien either, but his intro was a fun story. Thanks so much, Sean. I appreciate you chiming in with your feedback. And again, a great friend of our show. Yeah. We also heard from your Morning After podcast at Ashes to Ashes on Twitter. We also heard from Matt Quinn at Thorazine666. Another good friend of our show, Jordy Yarden at Regal Fan. Zach Sally at Zach_Sally. Warren Heatley at Where Viking, Christopher Hamby at Chris Hamby Films. Hey, thanks so much. Yeah. The Batman Universe at The Batman Universe. Donovan Morgan Grant, where you can find his great stuff on the Batman Universe. Donovan Morgan Grant can be found on Twitter at DonoDMG1. And our good new friends, Virginia Blues at Virginia_Blues. We also heard from Reform at Matt M. Kenna, and new listener, thank you so much. This would be Dan Brown. Dan Brown can be found on Twitter at Detective651, who chimed in to say, listen to the Bat Books for Beginners podcast for the first time with at B2 on Bat Books and Professor Frenzy talking about Batman and Son. Wasn't sure about the theme song, but he liked it, and he's going to go back and he's going to start listening to it. #Batman. Thank you so much, Dan. We really appreciate it. Now, I'm absolutely positive I had to have overlooked someone, and for that, I sincerely apologize. But please leave me a message on the Batman Universe website or direct message me on Twitter, and we will be sure to mention you on our next episode.
Yes, we will. Thank you, Chris. That's terrific. So that's all we have for today. Please join us in 2 weeks where Chris and I will cover Gotham Underground. My name is Gerry.
And I'm Chris.
And thank you for listening to Bat Books for Beginners.
A Batman trade, but hate the purchases you've made. Some stories sound so awesome, but they're not. They're a classic Gotham tales. Batman succeeds or it fails. Whatever happens, you know the Dark Knight can't be stopped. Our podcast will stop your buying paralysis. Chris's knowledge and Gerry's analysis. They are fans, but they are true in telling you what stories they highly rate, which are sucky and which are great. So come on and don't be late. Bad Books for Beginners.